I really felt the urge to push at this point. My body was pushing with each contraction, but it felt so good to also really bear down and push as well. And I was kind of on one knee and I had the other one propped up and I was over my birth ball. And I think it was maybe about 20 minutes until I actually felt his head. And I think that's the only point throughout this whole labour. It kind of felt like I wasn't going to give birth. Honestly, it felt way too easy.
I had my children on the floor. I was on my favourite blanket that my grandmother gave me on the floor like a cat.
And I realised in that moment the potential of what our bodies can really do as women.
Like I could feel his head, I could do my own internal, like, yeah, his head, I could feel it.
I was in tears, I was just in tears and overwhelmed with gratitude.
Hi and welcome to the Natural Birth Podcast, the podcast that is bringing embodied birth wisdom from women from all over the world sharing their natural birth stories. Don't forget to subscribe and download so that you can always have access to these empowering and positive natural birth stories. Hi Emily and welcome to the Natural Birth Podcast. How are you?
Hi Anna, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
So excited to have you. We were just chatting before we hit record that I think I actually started to follow you first because you were homesteading over in northern Scotland and I was moving back to Sweden and I was just longing to also live in the countryside and wanted to learn. And you had just all these beautiful little reels talking about how to purify water and all these things. And I was like, oh, I have to follow this woman. And then you ended up getting pregnant and having babies and you started listening to my podcast. And here we are. I'm so excited to finally meet you.
Thank you. I think it was divine timing because I needed to find you at the exact time that I did as well with my first birth. And it's really lovely to hear positive birth stories because I feel like in real life, they're kind of few and far between. So yeah, you've been amazing for me. So thank you for that.
Oh, I'm so excited. And it's full circle. Here you are now. Tell your own two birth stories.
Woohoo!
Woohoo! I mean, that's one of the things that makes me so happy is how many listeners come on the show. Like people will like text me literally days after birth going like, I just had my natural birth and now it's my turn. I want to come on your podcast.
Oh, that's amazing.
No, it's so, so beautiful. Makes me so happy. And it's so lovely to meet people that have been really reaping the rewards of listening, not to just one story, but like binging. And I have like 5 years worth of binging worth material now. So if anyone's like, pregnant or even conceive, like in that conception phase, like you can just listen for the next year, like you'll not run out.
Yeah, and prepare yourself from the get-go.
Yeah. Well, anyways, I want to hear your story. So I know you and your husband went to live more rurally. And was your idea already that you wanted to prep for having babies in that way?
Yes, absolutely. I think, well, when I first found out I was pregnant, we were definitely ready to have a baby and we were tracking my cycle at the time. And the first time that we kind of went for it, I fell pregnant, which was great, exactly what we wanted. And yeah, from there, I was so excited, but I also had this, oh my gosh, because I think throughout your whole life, all you're ever told is these really scary negative stories in every movie and TV show that you watch. It's kind of horrendous when you think about it. So I had this like excitement, but I was also like, I am terrified because I'm going to need to give birth, which is awful for one of the most exciting times of your life. And I think I was trying to find a doula. I eventually found one from Holland and she worked in Scotland as well. And she was just incredible and really normalized it for me. And from there, she was kind of like, why don't you listen to this podcast and listen to this podcast? And just getting natural birth in my head, I think that might be why we have 9 months to prepare and we can sort of get our heads around it. It was a game changer. For me, all fear went out the window. I think I just spent 9 months preparing for labor, so much so that I didn't know what to do once the baby was here. I didn't know how to put a nappy on or anything. But at least I wasn't necessarily scared of giving birth.
Yeah, that's such a common story too. And I love that you say that because that's like 99.9% of women will like prep for the birth and then go like, here's dynamite in my hands. How do I care for this life that just came out of me? And I mean, that's a different topic, like the postpartum and like how important it is to also obviously plan for that. But so common though, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, yeah, and I think, well, so throughout my first birth, I wanted to have a home birth. And I think at the time that I was having Rosemary, that's my daughter, it was really hectic with the NHS. I think my certain trust were really understaffed. And when I was due to give birth, it was around Christmas time. So they were struggling more and more. And we sort of didn't think that I was even going to have the opportunity to have a home birth. But I'm very stubborn. And I sort of said that if there's no one here to help, it's fine. But I would rather free birth than go to the hospital. I just wanted to stay away from there. The closest hospital to me has almost a 50% cesarean rate. And
What?
that, yes, and that scared me more than free birthing my first baby.
Yeah, that's insane. Why would they have such a high rate? That's
I don't,
insane.
sorry.
That is wild. That is dangerous. Like that high of a cesarean rate means something is very, very wrong in that hospital.
Yes, very over medicalized. And I don't know what percentage of that is elective C-sections. But that in itself is pretty extreme. So they managed to put on a service for me between the hours of 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. Um, yeah, but I was grateful for anything at that point. And with my first, sorry, I've just sort of jumped into it. Is that okay?
You do you. You do you. This is your story, so of course. But yeah, I mean, I'm curious to know when so you all the time you were like, I'm gonna go with the NHS. You never, I mean, is there any privately practicing home birth midwives in your area? No.
No. So in the UK, in England, you're allowed private midwives, but in Scotland, there's something to do with the insurance. So there is no private midwives in Scotland. I would have gone for a private midwife, but there was none. I would have to travel to England, which totally defeats the purpose of a home birth.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, yeah, it's crazy. All these different rules and how countries can be so different. And yeah, right now we're having a massive witch hunt on home birth midwives. Actually, one of the best home birth midwives we have in Sweden, who's in her 70s now, still doing home births and doing like twin home births, breech home births, like
wow.
caring for women who've had a VBAC, caring for women who want to have a home birth and that would have either free birth or, yeah, well, probably free birth. She attends their birth, right? And she's so wise and knowledgeable and have done this for what, 40 years? I don't know, 50 years? How long? Like she just got banned from doing home births because the institutions to be thinks that women shouldn't do twin birth at home, they shouldn't do breech birth at home, they shouldn't do VBACs at home, so we're just going to punish the midwife who does it, so women don't have the choice to employ someone.
That's awful. So women that are going to be taking on these labours are now being forced to do it on their own
Yeah.
or go to hospital. That's really awful. That's it. And it's making it more dangerous
Oh, of
if
course.
they want to talk about danger.
Yeah, of
Wow.
course. Yeah. And they say, this was just happening yesterday in the news, and the institutions to be are saying, like, oh, we're not, home birthing is not illegal. And like, we don't want to stop home birthing. But in essence, they are because the ones who are then allowed, quote unquote, to home birth are going to be so few according to their guidelines and their ideas of what's safe.
Mhm. Yeah, they're just taking the choice away.
Hmm. Yeah.
Ugh.
Anyways, okay, so no home birth midwives privately in Scotland, but the NHS provides it. Okay. Then I get why you
Yes.
went with them. Hmm.
Yeah. And to be honest, most of the midwives that I did meet, I really jived with. There was one that I didn't jive with so well. I think it was just a clash of personalities, but I think I'd only let them know at like 34 weeks because it hadn't come up before that. And I sort of said, I want to have a home birth. And it was this really big deal. So they came out and they did the assessment. It was this one that I didn't jive with and another midwife. And she waited for the other midwife to leave. And she started going on about how many babies she's had to resuscitate. She was peeved off that I didn't want a positioning scan, at 36 weeks. I just said that I didn't feel it was necessary. I knew that my baby wasn't breech and it wasn't going to affect my wishes anyway. And she would not stop going on about shoulder dystocia. She phoned me twice that night when she got home to really keep going on about shoulder dystocia and how important it was for me to sort of go and get a scan. And it was awful. Like I stood my ground when she was there, but when she left, I phoned my husband because he works away. He works offshore, so he wasn't even home for the majority of my pregnancy for both of them. And I was just in floods of tears. And it was so stressful. And I think to do that to women at the most important time when they're meant to feel peace and really start to lean into it, it was awful to look back on, to be honest.
Well, she really sounds like she was really afraid of home birth. She shouldn't be a home birth midwife. She shouldn't offer that. And I don't know how it works in the NHS if they can say no to being giving service in the home if they don't feel safe. I don't
Yeah,
know how it works for them, but it sounds like she really shouldn't be on that service because she obviously has a lot of baggage and trauma that she's carrying into every birth, especially
yeah,
home births. Like being afraid, she's afraid of shoulder dystocia, obviously. She's afraid of babies needing resuscitation. And there's
yeah,
home birth midwives that have done that and they don't carry the fear of that. They can be in that room and go like, I know what to do if that happens. But obviously she might have had an adverse outcome or something in her baggage that just now is really influencing her.
yeah, yep. And I was in two minds about it all because I didn't want to be sort of arrogant and say, I don't want this person because I was so grateful at the point for their care as well. You know, people are giving up their weekends and their evenings to be on there for you. And it was a whole mix of emotions. So yeah, I ended up going into labor. I think I was 39 and 4 with my first.
Mm.
And my waters went on Friday afternoon at about 3 in the afternoon. And I didn't want to phone them straight away because I didn't want to get put on a clock. But I was also aware that their their team was 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. So of course, my daughter had to wait until Friday afternoon. Um, and my waters just trickled. I phoned to let them know, but I said that I was fine. I didn't want anyone to come out because I felt good and they weren't ramping up at all. So this kept happening for 2 days. It was just really sporadic and my waters were leaking and like sometimes they'd be so light and then I would lie down and it was really intense that you would have to sit up and I just had no idea what was going on. It turned out she was back to back. So I think she just wasn't, this is where it was taking ages and
So
um,
when you say, so your water's kind of broke, it sounds like a hind water leak or something that kind of trickles, yeah?
yeah.
And did you have contractions at all, or was that just the waters were trickling for the weekend?
So yeah, I was having contractions, but they weren't they were so much that I couldn't sleep through them.
Mm.
Like every time I would lie down, it would be whoa, and you'd get that really intense. But if I was standing up or sitting up, they were hardly there. And I was so confused. Yeah, it was definitely down to her positioning.
Mm.
Um, so it really ramped up on Sunday evening. That's when I started getting like I had to be in the shower and you were sort of having to breathe through them. And I was pretty exhausted by this point because I couldn't really sleep since Friday. And my midwife that I loved, she had been with me for quite a while and she had to leave. She had to go home and get some sleep. So that other midwife tapped in. And I think, yeah, from there, it was probably my own fault because I was trying to hide in my own house. You know, you just wanted to get into the tiniest little room and I wanted it to be me and my husband. And it got to the point that my body started pushing. And I can remember saying to him, like, don't tell the midwife, which is so crazy to think back on now because I knew that it would be sabotaged. And it was.
Mm.
Yeah. So she heard that one of my contractions were pushy and decided to check with the Doppler for the heart rate. And it had dipped during a contraction, but she was really far down at that point. Like I think had I actively pushed a bit more, she wouldn't have been far off being born. But the midwife was very concerned and she screamed about phoning the ambulance and the ambulance came. And this was like 3 in the morning and I was like, is this really necessary? And you don't want to I didn't want to be silly at the same point because we're like an hour away from the hospital.
Mm.
Um, So I thought, you know, I'll just go to hospital because I'd rather everything be okay.
Mm.
Um, And I ended up getting there, and they sort of said, it's really important we get this baby out soon. I was like, I agree. They said that I have 20 minutes. If not, I needed to go for a C-section. Yeah,
What
it
was
was,
this time like? Did they listen to the heart rate at this time? Like, what was it doing? What was the heart rate doing?
they were concerned that it was dropping quite a lot during contractions and then would go back up and it was dropping so low. But I
And
don't
it
know,
came
because
back? It came back in between contractions?
yes, I don't know, did my midwife freak because she didn't realize that I was at pretty much almost transition.
Hmm.
Like maybe she thought that I was still super far away. But yeah, I felt fine and I felt that baby was fine. And I just got to the hospital, and it's like everything that I didn't want to happen that you'd prepared for 9 months to avoid ended up happening. The lights were on, there was a room full of people, nobody was listening to me. I can remember turning around and my husband was in a set of scrubs, and I was like, this baby's coming, no one's listening to me. There was an anesthetist there trying to get me to sign something, and I was like, I was just really like, I was angry. I wasn't upset, I was angry.
Hmm.
Um, so I was in there and I caught the eye of this young midwife. She was like fresh out of her training, and she like looked at me and she was like, this baby coming? And I said, this baby's coming. Like, please, will you listen to me? I could feel her getting lower and lower. I was like, I'm getting onto my knees. So I turned my back to everybody in that room. I was like, I'm just not taking this on board. And I can remember by this point, I couldn't even feel my contractions anymore. I don't know if it's because I was so out of my bubble, was I just too tired? But on the screen, she was telling me when my contractions were coming. And she took my hand and she's like, right, Emily, if you want this baby out, we're going for it. And I pushed with every contraction that she told me. I know, I know. And I felt the ring of fire, and she leaned round, and I can still, you just find these angels in amongst the madness. And I can still remember her. She just took me and she said, don't be scared. Do not be scared. This is normal. You're feeling your baby. You're about to meet your baby. And then she came out, and she came out all in one, and she screamed her way into the world. And she was this healthy, beautiful pink baby. And I sat there and I was like, how have you all managed to ruin this?
Yeah.
I had so much anger,
Hmm.
like looking back on that birth. And, a few people were like, oh, it sounds so traumatic. But to me, it wasn't trauma. I was peeved off.
I hear you. I hear you. It actually makes me tear up when you said that, like that she was your angel. And like I've been there so many times, like being this person in a room of just like chaos and like
Yeah.
so like unlogical people, how they're acting when a woman is birthing and how they cannot
Yeah.
see the woman.
Yes.
It makes me really emotional because it's just this story is unfortunately so common. And it also, when you're telling me now, I understand why this hospital has 50% cesarean rate
Yeah.
because they're so quick to act.
Yes.
They're so deeply scared and they find that massive abdominal surgery is better
Mm.
than just waiting and seeing. And like you're saying that your baby's heart rate is recovering after each contraction.
Yeah.
Like we know, like this is the thing, right? So it's so hard when it comes to this, whether it's both Pinard Doppler or CTG, because actually what evidence shows is to listen to the baby's heart rate in labor and in birth. Actually, there's no better outcome from that. In fact, it's the opposite, that
Mm.
it increases any form of actually listening to the baby. And I'm not saying not to listen to the baby. And I know
Yeah.
that there's absolute times where you should listen to the baby and you can get great information from it sometimes in some circumstances. But to routinely listen and how often these things happen, that babies come out in cesareans, pink, happy, no issue, which means that cesarean was absolutely unnecessary
Mm.
because you misjudge
Yeah.
the Doppler, the CTG, the heart rate.
Hmm.
And it's so extremely frustrating, and there's no reflection in the system at all on this. Actually,
Yeah.
the absolute opposite is happening. They just want more surveillance, more control, and more women and babies are ending up in adverse outcomes, major abdominal surgery, massive, repercussions of this. And yeah, it really just touches me. So it just stirred something deeply in me when you said that she was there for you and holding your hand, and and I love how you got angry. Like
Hmm.
that's what you need to do in that moment. Get bloody angry and go
Yeah.
like, you guys, are wrong. Uh,
Yeah.
like just own your, because at the end of the day, sometimes you can't, sometimes like especially in our world today, you just get caught up in the intervention cycle.
Yeah.
And all you can do right then and there, Emily, is exactly what you did. Just be your strong mama lioness self. That's all you can do. You can't control your outside. You can only control your inside. And you did that. You were so in control of yourself. And that's all you can do.
Yeah.
The rest of the
Like,
world can put their scrubs on and do their thing and chat to you and bright lights. You can, even in that moment, and I hope people hear this, and especially if you had this kind of birth, like you can go inside and like find your inner strength. Like it's there for you.
mhm,
It's there for you. You are the power, and the
mhm,
power is coming through you, and just focus on that.
mhm. And I think it's difficult to remember that when it feels like everything's against you and you are not being listened to. I feel like I'm also too stubborn. I want to be like, no, I'm going to show each one of you in this room that my baby is coming, like I've been trying to say.
Love it.
But yeah, I will never forget that midwife. And I just think, yeah, I went and brought her a gift afterwards and just wrote her a card. And I just wanted her to know throughout the rest of her career how important those small moments are. Because I think if you've been doing it for a while and you're used to hospital births and you're used to seeing all sorts, that maybe you can sort of lose the compassion along the way. Some people do. But yeah, she was incredible.
And you know what? I also feel like it's not even that. It's like you're in that system, and to survive, you
Yeah.
have to one, desensitize, two, become a part of the culture, because otherwise you're going to be an outcast and you're going to quit.
Yes.
Like I've
Yeah.
done.
Yeah.
You have to be a part of it. And so you have to also believe the narratives. You have to also give into the fear and into like, oh, talking about that woman, I need her consent, and I'm going to go and consent her, or like she's being difficult. Like all that, you have to be a part of this
Yeah.
really horrible culture that's
Mhm.
dominating in our hospitals, unfortunately. And if you're not, you're going to quit.
Yeah. 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 Because your style is completely different to what you're being told to believe.
And it's traumatizing as well. Like for me as a midwife who's
Yeah.
been in that system, it was traumatizing to be in that
Yeah.
system. I had to get out.
Yeah.
If you can't switch off, which I can't and I don't
Mm.
want to,
Yeah.
you can't stay there.
Yeah.
So the young midwives are coming with a different passion and heart, but
Mhm.
many will soon get into that.
Mhm.
They have to
Yeah.
survive.
Yeah. Ah,
But you had your baby, and your baby was fine.
I had my baby and she was fine. Um, and yeah, I think, looking back, when I compare it to my second birth, I probably took quite some time to recover, like physically. But when I was in it, I'm just a very much get on with it sort of person. Like, yeah, I was sore and I was sore for a few months, which having my first baby, I thought maybe that's just normal. I didn't know. Yeah, like even walking, I can remember I'd walk the dogs every day and I'd feel some heaviness, and that happened for a good few months, but I was definitely fine around the 6 month mark. But comparing it to my second labor and recovery, there's just no comparison.
Yeah,
So I think maybe the force at which she came out probably affected me, and I just didn't know it at the time.
yeah, for
Um,
sure. I mean,
yeah,
doing that, you know, it can happen. Of course, you can have the sensations anyways, but definitely
yeah,
forced pushing is not advisable. It puts a lot of pressure on your pelvic floor
yeah, yeah, definitely.
unnecessarily.
Hmm. So going into my second pregnancy, I was breastfeeding Rosemary for probably 6 or 7 months exclusively, and then we started introducing foods. But she was still feeding quite a lot, and I still hadn't had a cycle back. And we knew we wanted more kids, but we weren't actively planning for our second. And I was just starting to feel really weird. She was probably around 10 months old, my first one at this point, and I can remember having a meltdown one night because my husband was going back off to work and he works away for months at a time. And I said to him, I just feel so exhausted and I feel sick all the time. And I think I'm coming down with a virus. And I was like spiraling because I thought that I was going to get severely ill and need to take care of my toddler on my own. And he was like, everything's going to be okay. So he left. I can still remember this. He left on the Monday morning. And I was eating stew for breakfast. I was so hungry. I was having all these cravings. I didn't know that I was pregnant. I had every symptom under the sun. And I was sitting there and I was so tired. And I thought, oh, maybe I should just check in case I'm pregnant. But I hadn't had my cycle back. I actually thought that it was almost impossible because I hadn't had a cycle. And I straight away popped up pregnant. I was like, how did I not know this?
Yeah, well, I guess you know, you have to ovulate before you have a cycle, and if you if that sperm gets to that egg, you don't have a period, right?
Yeah, that must be what happened. Um, so yeah, I was like very happy, but in the same breath, I instantly had this feeling again of, oh, I really hope this time around goes better, than the first.
Mm.
And I think from the get-go, I definitely went into the the midwife trust with like a whole different mindset. And I was sort of like, I really like you guys. If you respect me, I respect you. And I did want midwives there. I didn't necessarily want free birth, but I sort of said, if there's any fear mongering, I'm just going to remove myself from this. I'm happy to get my blood work done. I still want to go to scans. I always loved seeing like them on the scans, and it made me feel really good and reassured. But I was like, if there's no issues and if issues are being created, then that's when I'm just going to peace out because I'm not going through what happened with the first one. It might be the last time that I'm ever pregnant and I don't want to sabotage it.
Mm. And how were you met doing that, saying that?
Really, really well. Um, yeah, one of the midwives that I had the first time around that I really jived with, she was my maid midwife and she supported home birth and she was so about informed consent, everything that she would present to me. She said, "This is why we offer it. Here's a leaflet if you want to read it, but it's up to you," which I love. I think that every person who is in a medical field needs to have that approach. It's just so empowering.
Mm.
And it was so nice getting to the latter stages of pregnancy and not feeling any sort of push or fear, or they were like, "How do you feel? How is baby? Everything fine? You happy going home?" Yep, all good. It was amazing. They were really, really incredible. They've got such a good team.
Beautiful. I love that. And but that's the same team though that had that other midwife on board, no?
Yes, and the other midwife has since left.
Oh, good. Time for that to happen.
Yeah, I agree. And yeah, I met a few of them, and I can honestly say that every single one that I met, because they all took turns of the on-call phone, um, every single one I thought, yeah, I'd be super happy with you being in my home. So it was just an incredible feeling.
Hmm. Beautiful. Love that. So let's dive on into the birth story, shall we?
Yes, 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 yes. So I was getting a bit far on. I think because my first was 39 and something. You hear that your second ones can come a little bit quicker. I know it's not always. I kind of convinced myself I was anywhere from 38 weeks. That's when my husband got home at 38 weeks. So I thought, okay, you're good to come out now, baby, whenever you want. And those last weeks felt longer than my whole pregnancy. I'm all about baby's gonna come when baby's ready to come. But I really found myself drinking the pineapple juice and scrubbing the floors and sniffing clary sage and having lots of sex. And I was like, come on, I can't do anything else. But as we know, babies are on their own timeline. So it got to almost 41 weeks. And I'd had no, like the midwives weren't pressuring me. There was no talk of induction. I think it was just, I was kind of getting in my own head because I didn't want to be presented with, you're now at 42 weeks. What are you going to do? It was totally me.
Mm.
So I can remember my toddler was going to childcare one day. And my husband, we were in the middle of renovating a house, and he sort of said, "Right, Emily, let's just take a day off. Let's have no stress. Let's go to the city and get some lunch and wander around charity stores and antique stores and just chill and have a fun day." And I was like, yeah, okay, this is exactly what we need. So we did that. and we went to this antique store. This is a little side story that I find so funny. And it's this huge, like, there's loads of different buildings. And we walked into this one building and we were both drawn to this big book. We went over to it. It turns out it was a Bible and it was like gold plated. It was lovely. And Will, my husband, he was like, "Will we get this?" And I was like, "Well, I really like it." And we're getting ready to move into our new home. So it was £30. We thought we'll get this beautiful book. And we were walking back to the car and I jokingly said out loud, "Okay, Lord, if you can hear me, I would like to go into labour tomorrow morning between the hours of 2 and 3 o'clock. I want to labour on my own for a few hours until my toddler wakes up. I'd like to give birth by late afternoon and be in bed by 8:30, 9 o'clock at night." And I was like, "So if you could just do that." And we were laughing. We got into the car. Went home that night and he said, "Emily, why don't you sleep in the spare room tonight? Because we still co-sleep with my toddler." He's like, "At least you can get a proper sleep and just relax." So I definitely jumped at that opportunity. And lo and behold, the next morning, I woke up just before 2 o'clock and I was like, "Is that a feeling?" Like it was like a dullness in my lower back. And I was like, "I don't know, is it?" And so I tried to go back to sleep and they slowly started ramping up. And I thought they weren't intense, but I couldn't go to sleep. So I got up out of bed and I decided to go for a shower and just put on fresh pajamas and have a cup of tea and a bit of toast and just relax. And they were really ramping up by this point. I was trying to read my book. It was about 5:30 on the couch. I was reading a book and I can remember every sort of, I wasn't timing it, but I was like having to stop and be like, "Oh, they're getting my attention now." So I phoned my mum and just to see if she could, come out and help. Almost just make sure that my daughter was fine. I know that my husband had it, but just to have another hands in amongst the place so that I could really focus. I just think that I wouldn't have been in my head. I didn't want to labour with her around because I wouldn't have got into it. So from there, I think it was about 7 in the morning. I was just sitting speaking to my mum. It was so normal. And we were just watching the birds, and every contraction I was having, I was dropping to my knees. And, my mum was like, "You okay?" And I was like, "Yeah, I just feel better being on the ground." I was breathing through it. And she said, "Emily, these are coming every 4 minutes." And I was like, "It's fine because they're not that intense. I could still breathe through them. I could move through them." My husband got my toddler ready. He took her off to daycare. And I think from there, it just kept progressing. I put the TENS machine on at like maybe 8 in the morning. And then I just wanted to lock myself in my bedroom. I didn't want to speak to anyone. My poor mom, she kept popping her head in and being like, "Can I get you anything?" And I was like, "No, please go away." I felt like a real urge to be on my own and have my music in and just be moving and swaying and not being observed. And yeah, I know that my mum and my husband weren't judging me for making noises, but I just felt like I could fully relax with no one else there. Um, yeah, I'm trying to think where this brings us to. About 10 in the morning, they were getting really intense and I was getting quite cold and shivery. So I lay down on my bed and I fell asleep for a couple of hours. And I woke up, and from there, like they'd really spaced out. They were like 15, 20 minutes apart, but the ones that were coming were so strong. And my husband checked in on me and he said, I was really upset at this point. I was like, "I don't know what's happening. I don't want another 3-day labor." And you like start psyching yourself out a little bit. I think just from my first labor, I was like, "I can't do this for 3 days." And he's the exact presence that I need throughout both of my labors. He sort of said, "Honey, I know you're comfortable in your little cave," because it was dark and I was in bed and I just wanted to be on my own. He said, "But what do you think about like getting up and we can just walk around the garden and just see how you feel?" And I was like, "Okay." So he dragged me out of bed. We went for a walk. I had one contraction that I sort of fell to my knees. And we went back into the kitchen. He made me like a ham and cheese roll, and I had one other contraction. And this is in like the space of an hour. I only had two contractions really. And I was feeling pretty disheartened. Um, and throughout the whole time, like my mum and my husband, neither of them suggested phoning the midwives because they know that I'm incredibly stubborn and I push back. The more push I get for something, I end up pushing back. So I think they let me come to this decision on my own because I didn't want to phone them too early, but I was also a bit like, I don't know what's going on. This is like no labor that I've heard of before. It just was really stalling. And so I phoned my midwife and I was kind of teary on the phone to her. And I was like, Kirsty, I feel fine, but I just know I can't do this for 3 days. And she was like, Emily, why don't I just come out? So I was like, okay. And I felt so good. You know, as soon as she came in, I just had this like feeling, which is amazing. And yeah, throughout my whole plan, like I didn't even write a birth plan this time around. But I sort of said to her, you know, I don't want interventions. I don't want to be checked, everything else. And, you know, she said she checked baby's heart rate, everything was fine. She checked my temperature, observations, everything's fine. And she said, do you want me to check you? And I was like, do you know what? At the time, I did want her to check me. I think in my head, and I know from listening to your podcast and everything else, it doesn't necessarily make a difference. And you can go from 2 centimeters to 10 centimeters in an hour. But I think at that moment, like I almost just wanted to understand a little bit more.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So she watched me have a contraction and she was like, yeah, they seem to be pretty strong. And then she checked me and she was like, okay, you're 6 or 7 centimeters. And I was like, okay, great. In my head, I was like, this is just what I needed. And I think from there, rather than wanting to go back to sleep, I was almost like, okay, it's go time.
I love that. Yeah,
Yeah,
sometimes it can, when it's mother's choice, it can be helpful. And,
yeah,
there's always, it's a skill there for a reason. It's just not supposed to be used as it does today, so routinely and so often, like every 2 hours or whatever. But
yeah,
it can definitely be something that can help.
yeah. And it did. It really, really helped. I think it was just a total mindset shift. It was like going from this, me being, I was definitely playing the victim and I was like, I can't do this for days on end, to like, oh, okay, we're here. We can do it.
Yeah. And it also
So,
goes to show, the variations of normal and how this is
yeah,
just, I mean, this is birth though. And
yeah,
that, what you experienced as a stall, sometimes we have these plateaus. They're called physiological plateaus, right? And
yeah,
and sometimes we just need to have a rest. And
yeah,
the body's just getting this rest, and there's nothing wrong with it either.
yeah. And I think at the time it is because I felt so exhausted. It was only, 10 in the morning. I'd only been up since 2 o'clock, but my body was exhausted. So I'm glad it got a wee chance to recuperate. So from there, she phoned the other midwife because in Scotland for home births, you're meant to have two midwives. And they asked, could the student come as well? And I said, absolutely, the student can come, but they're going to need to be in another room because I don't want all of these people watching me. And they were so respectful. They waited in the kitchen the whole time and had a cup of tea with my mom. And it was lovely. Um, so I called them at about 1. I think at about 3 o'clock, um, my midwife, she said, do you want to get in the bath? I was like, yeah, that would be really nice, to feel the hot water. I think my contractions again were coming every sort of 4 minutes at this point. So I got into the tub. It felt amazing. And it felt too good because I fell asleep again at the side of the tub. My contractions again went back to like 15, 20 minutes. And by this point, I was like, I'm getting out of here because I felt like I was so close to having a baby, but I was so confused as to why. You hear that they're meant to be every sort of 1 to 2 minutes, and then you start pushing. And I was like, just like, what's going on? Where is this baby? Yeah. So I got out, went, waddled back through to the bedroom, and I think my next contraction sort of brought me to my knees. I think I must have got out of the tub at 4:45 in the afternoon. My next contraction brought me to my knees, and I was like, whoa, that one felt so much more intense. I was kind of like over my ball. I put the TENS machine back on because that was just a godsend this time. Being able to boost it every time, I think it just gave me some sort of feeling of control and something else to focus on. And then my next contraction, I was like, oh, what am I feeling? I was like, Kirsty, what am I feeling? Because I couldn't see past my bump. And it was the sack of waters. So that sort of came out
Hmm.
and it was still intact. I thought it would, yeah. It's never just like the movies, is it?
And that is quite common. It's called the bulging waters. It's something that I see a lot, especially in home births, when the waters haven't broken, that happens. Yeah.
Yeah, because I felt it and I was like, okay, that's too soft to be a head. I was like, if that's the head out, this is great news. That was so easy. Um, so then the next contraction that burst, and I really felt the urge to push at this point. My body was pushing with each contraction, but it felt so good to also really bear down and push as well. And I was kind of on one knee and I had the other one propped up and I was over my birth ball. And I think it was maybe about 20 minutes until I actually felt his head. And I think that's the only point throughout this whole labor. Throughout the whole labor, it kind of felt like I wasn't going to give birth. Honestly, it felt way too easy. In comparison to my first, I kept gaslighting myself thinking that I wasn't in labor this time because I was like, it's meant to be more painful. Why is it? It wasn't painful. I can honestly say that it was totally, completely manageable. And that's why I kept thinking it was so far away because I was like, we can't be at this point. But we were. And yeah, when that head was there, it was the first point that I panicked. I really thought like, oh wow, that's I'm not going to be able to give birth to this baby. It felt way too big, and I think my midwife like totally sensed that shift. I think I started kind of whimpering, and she was like, Emily, and she reminded me, just breathe. We got to breathe through this because this baby's coming out. And, I think it was two pushes and the head was out. But my goodness, the ring of fire was something else. I really, really felt it this time. Um, and he sort of sat there, and I can remember Will being like, oh my gosh, like you can see him, Emily, you can feel his head. And I could feel his head. And then the next contraction came, and I pushed with it, and he didn't budge. And, I think had I been in hospital, it could have been a totally different scenario. My midwife did not say one thing. Like do you know, I can remember at that moment, all that was in my head was shoulder dystocia, shoulder dystocia. And again, it might have been from my first birth, but it was like over and over. And I was like, no, it's going to be fine. I purposely didn't look at either of their faces because I was so scared of seeing like concern. And so I was like, just keep breathing. Everything's going to be fine. I think I sort of shifted a little bit because I had one knee up and I sort of kept moving my pelvis a little bit. And the next contraction, he thankfully came right on out. And it was just amazing. It was completely amazing. The midwife was like, pick your baby up. And I was so surprised at how slippy he was. That's all I can remember thinking is, I can't because he keeps slipping out of my hands.
Yeah, they are very slippery.
So slippery. I pulled him up to my chest. He didn't make a noise. I was just watching him like, wow, he's so calm, but there was no fear that he wasn't screaming. I just had the towel and I gave his face a little rub and gave his belly a rub, and then he started crying from there. And I was just, it was complete elation and redemption, but also I was like, wow, this is so normal. It was like this feeling of this is how I feel birth should be. It was incredible, totally incredible. Even thinking about it now, I just get so happy. Like, I think back to my birth and I want to scream it from the rooftops, and I want people to know that it's so possible to have a birth like this.
Mm. Yeah. Oh, I hear you. I hear you. And, as someone who witnessed this so many times,
Yeah.
I feel the same every time. It's just, it's the absolute most magical thing in the world and also the most normal. And it's hard to
Yeah.
comprehend how you can feel both at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like huge and life-changing and you're so in awe, but you're also like it's yeah, natural. Like that's the exact word I keep coming back to. It just feels like it's how it's been done for hundreds and thousands of years. And
Yes.
here we are still doing it.
And you know what? You were so protected doing it at home because this is obviously very atypical. This is not a normal progression of labor. Like you don't have these big pauses in hospital. You're not allowed to, right? And if you were having a contraction after 7 centimeters of one every 4 minutes and then like dropping away and one every 15, every 20 minutes, you
Yeah.
know, the hospital, especially I can imagine that hospital with 50% cesarean rate would definitely not say that that was okay. They would want to put you on oxytocin, synthetic oxytocin, and they would want to, break your waters and manage you because you are not following, you're
Yeah.
not progressing, and that's not good. You need to progress steadily more and more and, peak, that's what they
Yeah.
want, right? It's like, it's almost like, this is funny, this just came to me. It's almost like they want the masculine orgasm to happen, where it's like intensify, 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 boom, you
Pop,
know?
out comes the baby.
Right? Whereas like, well, we're women, and what is the feminine orgasm like? Right?
Mm.
It's just like it's waves and waves, and you can have 10 of them, and they can come into all kinds of different shapes and sizes, and like that is
Yeah.
actually birth. That is
Yeah.
a really funny analogy right now.
I love
Metaphor that
that.
I will use forever. It's not the male orgasm, it's the feminine, the female orgasm.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and when I was listening to your birth story, I was like, ah, but also in the back of my head, I was like, ah, but also you had your first baby not that long ago. And that also, I think, really, like your channel is almost already so open for that
Mm.
second baby to come through that you didn't need much
Yeah.
sense too, right? You could have those like very sporadic, irregular contractions, and they did so much, and your waters were intact. So you had like more of this, I guess, volume inside open
Yeah.
you as well,
Yeah.
and then when they break in the end, you've already opened without really knowing because of all that extra water and space that the water takes up. And then when
Yeah.
that goes away, the baby just drops, and
Oh.
I can understand now how you birthed like that.
Yeah, so quick because I got out of the bath at I think it was like 3:45 and my waters must have gone maybe 10 minutes after that and he came out at 4:22. So that was all really quick right at the end.
Yeah, yeah.
But
Wow.
I just love it. I'm so happy I got to experience the kind of birth that I hear about in your podcast that I've been listening to for years in my ears. It's magical.
Mm, amazing. And so your baby's, on your breast, and do you birth your placenta in the water too, or what happens with that?
So I wasn't in the water. I'd gone back to my bedroom floor at this point,
Hmm.
sort of over the birth ball and stuff. Yeah,
Right.
it's all good. Maybe I didn't paint that picture very well. So baby came out on my chest. We were just sort of skin to skin, had all these moments, and then maybe after 5 or 10 minutes, I was like aware of how much blood I was losing. I
Mm,
was definitely like, that's a lot. I know that there's always going to be blood when you give birth. It's so normal, but there was a lot, and I was starting to feel slightly lightheaded.
mm,
So I was saying it to my midwife, and she was like, "Yeah, I am. I'm clocking how much is there." She said, "Would you mind if you sit on this, like little pan, so she could sort of gauge how much more was coming?" Yep, that's fine. And I was sitting there, and that filled up pretty quick. So she had a look, and she estimated that in the pan was about 700 mil, but I'd lost a fair bit before that. And she's like, "How are you feeling?" I said, "I'm feeling fine, maybe a little bit lightheaded." And she said, "I know you wanted a physiological third stage." She said, "How do you feel about the injection?" It's just because we are an hour away from the hospital and everything else. And at that point, I was like, yeah, like I'm totally happy to receive it. Um, I had everything else that I wanted. And so after about 10 minutes, we cut the cord because I didn't want the injection with the cord still being intact. And he went to my husband for skin to skin. And I just sort of asked, rather than pulling on it, could I just get up and sit on the toilet? And yeah, I was still losing quite a bit on the toilet, but it came out and I just sort of sat on the bed for a while and breathed and had some water and it did start slowing down, thankfully. I don't know how much I lost in the end, but I was aware I was lightheaded. But she recommended we go to the hospital. But she said, if you feel okay,
Mm.
you could stay at home. And I felt okay enough to stay at home.
Mm.
Yeah, it was just, you know, like even after that, we were curled up in bed and we had like the golden hour of just the three of us all getting to know one another. And they went through to the kitchen to do their notes and then came back through. And then after that, she asked, could she check me? And I was like, yep, absolutely. And I had a second degree. She said it was really like, I don't, normal's not the right word,
Yeah,
but
well, there's different kind of tears. So, a normal one would be like it comes back together. Like there's when you look at the vagina, the where the tear is, those kind of the walls of the tear, whatever you say, like they come back together neatly.
okay.
Probably
Yeah,
what she means.
yeah, that's what she was describing because she sort of said, you could let this heal naturally or you could get stitches, whatever you want. And I wanted stitches. So even that, like, it's just so funny to look back on. Like the fact that you can be stitched up on your bed. Like it's just really nice. That's probably not the right descriptive word, but she opened the curtains and we're in the middle of nowhere, so no one's peering in the windows. And I just shuffled to the bottom and she got a little stool and she had her head torch on and just gave me an injection and stitched me up. And I couldn't feel anything and it's healed so well. And yeah, everything just felt so normal.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And that's exactly how it should be. It
Yeah.
sounds like they were very respectful and they really knew what you wanted. And the language sounds so very woman-centered, which it
Yeah.
should be. Just asking, here's the different options. What do you want?
Mhm.
And for anyone listening who might be like, oh, why did you choose to take stitches instead of healing naturally? Do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, and actually, I'll compare it to my first birth. So with Rosemary, I did tear, and they said, you've got a second degree, but it's looking like it needs stitches. And at the point after that labor, I was like, get away from me. I do not want anything else. I'm going to heal naturally. And they kept me in hospital that night. And the next day I went for a shower and I had a good look and I was like, whoo, and it was still bleeding quite a lot. And I thought, I want stitches now. And because I had waited more than 24 hours to make that decision, I had to go into theatre and go under, like, be knocked out for it. And while they were doing that, they discovered that it was actually a bit more than a second degree. They thought it was just going into a third degree. So they were happy that I got it stitched. I was happy in the end that I got it stitched. I just wish I'd made that decision sooner. So this time around, when they said that, even though she said it was really normal and like quite minimal and it would come back together fine, I just thought, you know what, I would just rather get stitched and then that's it over and done with. And after this half an hour, I don't need to go to hospital. I don't need to do anything. So it's probably in relation to my first birth that I made that decision because I listen to your podcast and I hear a lot of people choosing to let it heal naturally.
Yeah, and it's totally up to the woman. And I was
Yeah.
curious because I knew obviously you had this little, very young little toddler.
Yeah.
And I think you just have to be aware, like if you want to, you can heal naturally, right? But if you
Mhm.
want to go that route, you really need to tend to it and you need to be in bed with your legs closed and be so mindful about it.
Yeah.
And I think the first birth, you can probably do that more easily. But when you have a little one that you're
Mhm.
running around after, and maybe you can't, like, you will accidentally get out of bed too quickly, or you will separate your legs, without thinking about it, sitting on the floor with you, and you need to be very aware of how you're caring for yourself if you want to heal naturally.
Yeah. Yep,
So
absolutely.
there,
And I
then I think the stitches could be something you want when you have that scenario, when you have a
yeah.
little one.
Yeah, definitely. And I think probably in a hospital setting, it's very rare that they hear that. The next day, when I had my first, the doctor came in and he was like, I'm really curious because I've never heard this before, but why did you want to heal naturally? And I was like, because I think our bodies are great and they're totally capable, but I could see him like, what? And it's funny, the same doctor during that conversation, he looked down at my ankle and he was like, oh, how long have you had this rash for? And I was like, I don't have a rash. And he pointed at this little thing on my ankle. And I'd been getting acupuncture throughout both of my pregnancies. And we got these, the little ones that can stay in. They're like a little plaster. That's what he was pointing at. And I said, oh no, that's acupuncture. And again, he was like, what? So I think it's quite nice for, yeah, to sort of merge the two and for doctors to be aware that there is other ways of doing things as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they don't get us exposed to that a lot.
No.
No. Right, beautiful. And concerning your blood loss as well, I mean, that is also midwives are there for that,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
we are very different what we can lose and how we feel and all of that. But we're capable of losing blood at birth and be okay. We have a lot of extra blood flowing around as we're pregnant, and that is going to shift anyways in the next few days after birth. Like you will pee out a lot after birth because you're
Mhm.
actually returning to normal, more normalish,
Yeah.
as a woman that's not pregnant anymore. And so it's okay to be able to lose a bit of blood. And
Yeah.
you were very aware. I love how you were so aware about it yourself and went like, okay, I'm feeling a bit now and I'm sensing this. And that's what we want. We want women to be like that, right? Take
Yeah.
self-responsibility. You know your body, you know how you're feeling.
Yeah.
And you don't have to listen to an external expert to know how you're feeling. You know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And it sounded like you just needed to birth that placenta as well. Just get it out. And sometimes that's it. As soon as you birth the placenta, it also eases with the blood flow.
Yeah. Definitely. Definitely. It was yeah, it was fine. And then we had a big bowl of stew after they left and we were tucked up in bed for 8:30, 9 o'clock at night. So every single thing that I asked for, I got for my labor. It was just wonderful.
Wow. I love this so much. This is so beautiful. Oh, I wish every woman could have this experience for her.
Oh, me too. Me too. And I think going into your recovery and just even your first few months postpartum, it's totally different when you've had a positive experience. And, I feel completely fine now. He's 10 weeks old and it's like night and day from my first.
Right.
I would love for anyone listening to this as well to know that it's totally possible. If you've had a birth that you weren't completely happy with or was traumatic or you felt like you had no control or power, that your second one doesn't need to be like that.
Mm-mm. Yeah, so true. Thank you so much for sharing that. Now, if you had a first-time mama in front of you right now who's about to have her first baby and she really wants to have a natural and empowering birth experience, what advice and pearls of wisdoms would you give to her?
I would just say protect your space and your peace as much as possible. Whether that means turning your phone off in the last few weeks, not watching the news, not having anybody in your bubble who on a spiritual level is not meant to be there. Someone that's not trusting of your body and your birth and your baby. I think it's so important to create a safe space for you to have the birth that you want to have.
I love that. And I can't help but remembering, how you said that you kind of said, God, this is what I want. And it sounds like you got that and how powerful like these statements are that we make.
Yeah.
I have had so many women come on this podcast and also clients who like have visualized their birth to a T and it happens.
Mhm.
And, you know, don't underestimate the power of programming your mind as well, of just saying these statements too,
Mhm.
how powerful that is, and it affects your body.
Yeah. Yep. Speak it out loud, ask for what you want,
Mm,
and hopefully you get it back.
yeah, yeah, beautiful. Or know that you will.
Yes.
Oh, thank you so much for coming and sharing your birth stories. It's been an absolute pleasure having you.
Oh, thank you for having me here. It's been amazing.
Beautiful. Thank you for listening. If you love this podcast, then please consider sharing it, leave a review, or make a contribution on our Patreon page. And if you want to connect on social media, then find the podcast on Instagram as the Natural Birth Podcast. Thank you for listening.